The bridge of the merchant vessel Prosperity's Dream shuddered as another plasma bolt struck their failing shields. Captain Zexai clutched his command chair with all four of his trembling arms while his crew frantically worked at their stations. The Kethmori pirates had been hunting them for 3 standard hours through the Nexus corridor, and their outdated cargo haulers stood no chance against the sleek Predator ships closing in. "Shield integrity at 12%, shouted Navigation Officer Veltar, her usually pristine blue fur now matted with sweat. "They're jamming our communications array. We can't call for help." Zexai's compound eyes tracked the tactical display showing 7 pirate vessels in pursuit. The Prosperity's Dream carried medical supplies bound for the plague-stricken colonies of Theta Centauri. If these pirates captured their cargo, thousands would die from the spreading bioplague that had already claimed 6 worlds. "Captain, I'm detecting something," called out the ship's elderly engineer, Mordek, from his station. His weathered green skin was pale with exhaustion. "There's an old emergency beacon frequency still functional. It's one of the ancient protocols from the Galactic Archive." "Ancient protocols?" Zexai's antennae twitched with confusion. "How ancient?" "Pre-Galactic Council era, sir. From before the Great Silence. The frequency is listed as, let me check the database, it belongs to something called Sol System Emergency Response Network." The ship rocked violently as another barrage found its mark. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and the acrid smell of burning electronics filled the air. Several crew members were thrown from their stations, crying out in pain as they hit the deck plating. "Sol System?" Veltar looked up from her damaged navigation console. "Isn't that in the quarantine zone? The dead system where those extinct Deathworlders used to live?" "Humans," Mordek corrected quietly. "They called themselves humans. The historical records say they went extinct in their system-wide civil war about 300 years ago. The Council sealed off their entire sector after the nuclear signatures went dark. Another massive impact sent the ship spinning. Emergency lighting bathed everything in an ominous red glow as primary power failed. The artificial gravity fluctuated, causing loose objects to float momentarily before crashing back down. "Shield failure in 60 seconds. Veltar screamed over the sound of groaning metal. "Hull breaches on decks 4 and 7. Zexai made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. "Mordek, transmit on that frequency. Send our location, ship identification, and a distress call. Include our cargo manifest so whoever might be listening knows what's at stake." "But, sir, that system has been dead for centuries." "No one will do it." Mordek's clawed hands danced over his console. "Broadcasting on Sol System Emergency Response Frequency, message sent, sir. Though I doubt anyone is listening in that graveyard." The pirate ships closed in for the kill. Their leader, a scarred Kethmori captain named Vraktios, opened a communication channel. His reptilian face filled the main screen, showing rows of razor-sharp teeth and what passed for a grin among his species. "Cargo vessel, this is Captain Vraktios of the free ship Blood Reaper. Surrender your cargo and we might let your crew live as slaves. Resist further and we'll space all of you after we take what we want anyway." "We carry medical supplies for the plague colonies," Zexai replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "These medicines are the only hope for billions of innocent lives." Vraktios laughed, a harsh sound like grinding metal. "Even better. Plague medicine sells for 10 times standard rate on the black market. My thanks for the profitable cargo manifest." The pirates prepared their boarding pods. Zexai watched helplessly as the bright trails of the assault craft launched from the pirate vessels. In minutes, his ship would be overrun and the medical supplies would disappear into the criminal underworld while entire civilizations died. Then, something impossible happened. Space itself seemed to tear open about 50,000 kilometers away. A massive rift appeared, crackling with energy that registered on sensors as technologies completely unknown to galactic science. The gravitational disturbance was so intense that both the pirates and the merchant vessel were pulled off course. "What in the name of the eternal void is that?" Vraktios snarled, his confidence evaporating as his sensors screamed warnings. From the rift emerged something that defied belief. A massive ship, easily 10 kilometers long, slid through the dimensional tear like a predator emerging from deep water. Its hull was matte black, covered in armor plating that seemed to absorb light itself. Strange blue energy coursed along channels carved into its surface, and weapon ports dotted its length like the scales of some impossible spaceborne leviathan. Unknown vessel, came a transmission on standard galactic frequencies. This is the UES Retribution, flagship of the Sol Defense Network. We received your distress call. Please identify hostile vessels and maintain your position for immediate assistance. The voice was calm, professional, and utterly alien to anyone who had lived in the past 3 centuries. It spoke perfect galactic standard, but with an accent that marked it as coming from the supposedly extinct human race. Impossible, whispered Veltar. The humans died out centuries ago. The council verified their extinction. But, impossible or not, the massive ship was very real and moving with purpose toward the pirate vessels. SOS, no coward despite his criminal nature, decided to treat the newcomer as just another target. All ships, concentrate fire on the unknown vessel. It's some kind of derelict automated system. Destroy it and, then, finish off the cargo hauler. The 7 pirate ships opened fire simultaneously. Plasma bolts, particle beams, and kinetic rounds struck the black ship's hull. The weapons that could have reduced the Prosperity's Dream to glowing debris seemed to do absolutely nothing to the newcomer. The energy discharges simply absorbed into the strange armor without leaving so much as a scorch mark. Direct hits confirmed, reported one of SOS's subordinates. No damage detected. Sir, their armor is absorbing our weapons fire completely. Then, we use the big guns, SOS growled. Charge the fusion torpedoes. Full spread. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the human ship, Admiral Sarah Chen watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. At 62 years old, she had served in the Sol Defense Network for her entire adult life, fighting through the corporate wars, the AI uprising, and the final unification of Earth under the emergency government. Her steel-gray hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her brown eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had seen too much war. Analysis complete, Admiral, reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb. 7 hostile vessels, configuration matches Kethmori pirate doctrine. The merchant vessel is broadcasting as carrying critical medical supplies. Humanitarian cargo, Chen nodded. Priority protection protocol is in effect. Commander, signal the fleet. Fleet? Webb looked confused. Ma'am, we're alone out here. Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Are we, Commander? Check your sensors again. Webb's eyes widened as his instruments revealed the truth. The dimensional rift was still active, and more ships were coming through. Many more ships. The UES Nemesis emerged first, a heavy battlecruiser bristling with weapons that belonged in a nightmare. Behind it came the Righteous Fury, its hull scarred from 100 battles but its engines burning with deadly purpose. Then, the Iron Will, the Last Stand, and the Unbreakable followed in formation. My God, whispered the communications officer, Lieutenant Sarah Kim. It's the entire First Fleet. Not the entire fleet, Lieutenant, Admiral Chen corrected. Just the advance guard. More ships continued to emerge from the rift. Destroyers, cruisers, and escort vessels formed protective formations around the larger ships. Each vessel bore the scars of countless battles, their hulls painted with kill markers and unit insignia that told stories of victories against impossible odds. On the Prosperity's Dream, Zexai and his crew watched in stunned silence as a human fleet of over 50 warships materialized from nothing. These weren't the primitive chemical rockets and nuclear weapons that the historical records described. These ships moved with a fluid grace that spoke of artificial gravity manipulation, energy shields, and weapons technologies that surpassed anything in the current galactic arsenal. How is this possible? Veltar whispered. The report said they destroyed themselves in a nuclear civil war. Perhaps, suggested Mordek quietly, the reports were wrong. SOS and his pirates were having similar thoughts, but their confusion was rapidly giving way to terror. What had started as a simple piracy operation against an unarmed merchant vessel had somehow become a confrontation with an entire fleet of unknown warships. This is Captain SOS of the Kethmori Free Company, he broadcast on all frequencies. We were not aware this system was under protection. We will withdraw immediately if passage is granted. Admiral Chen's response was broadcast to all vessels in the area. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Systems Defense Network. You are in violation of Galactic Maritime Law, Section 12, Subsection 4, Piracy against vessels carrying humanitarian supplies. You are also guilty of assault with intent to murder on the crew of the merchant vessel Prosperity's Dream. surrender immediately for processing, or be destroyed. United Earth Systems? Vraktios's voice cracked slightly. The humans are extinct. This is some kind of trick. I assure you, Captain Vraktios, we are very much alive. You have 30 seconds to cut your engines and prepare for boarding. Any aggressive action will result in immediate termination of your vessels and crews. The pirate captain's bravado finally cracked. These ships were larger, better armed, and clearly more advanced than anything in his experience. But he had not survived as a pirate captain by showing weakness when cornered. Kethmori vessels, attack formation. If we're going to die, we take them with us. The pirates launched their fusion torpedoes, their most powerful weapons. The brilliant points of light streaked across space toward the human fleet, carrying enough destructive force to level a small city. They never reached their targets. Point defense systems on the human ships activated with mechanical precision. Streams of charged particles intercepted each torpedo, detonating them harmlessly in space. The brilliant flashes of the fusion explosions were absorbed by energy shields that didn't even flicker under the assault. Return fire, Admiral Chen ordered calmly. Disable their engines and weapons. We want prisoners for interrogation. What happened next would be talked about in military academies across the galaxy for generations to come. The human ships opened fire with weapons that seemed to bend the laws of physics. Focused gravity waves crushed the pirates' engine sections like empty cans. Magnetic pulse cannons disabled their electrical systems without damaging the crew compartments. Energy beams precisely targeted weapon mounts, leaving the ships helpless but intact. In less than 2 minutes, 7 pirate vessels were reduced to drifting hulks. Their crews were alive but completely at the mercy of the human fleet. This is Admiral Chen to pirate vessels. You are now prisoners of the United Earth Systems Defense Network. Prepare for boarding and surrender all weapons. Any resistance will result in your immediate spacing. On the bridge of the Prosperity's Dream, the crew watched in absolute amazement as small craft launched from the human ships and began docking with the disabled pirate vessels. The boarding action was swift and professional, with no casualties on either side. Captain Zexai, came Admiral Chen's voice over their communication system. This is Admiral Chen. What is your status? Do you require medical assistance or emergency repairs? Zexai found his voice after several attempts. Admiral Chen, this is Captain Zexai. We have some injured crew members and our hull is compromised, but we can maintain life support. I must ask, are you really human? The records say your species went extinct 300 years ago. There was a pause before Chen responded. Captain, that's a longer story than we have time for right now. What's important is that your cargo reaches its destination. My medical officer tells me you're carrying plague medications for the Theta Centauri colonies. Yes, Admiral. The bioplague has already killed millions. Without these medicines, entire worlds will fall. Then, we'll escort you safely to your destination. Commander Webb, signal the fleet. We're proceeding to Theta Centauri at best speed. As the human fleet formed a protective formation around the merchant vessel, Zexai couldn't help but ask the question that was burning in everyone's mind. Admiral, if I may, where have your people been all these years? Why did the galaxy believe you were extinct? Admiral Chen's response would haunt the dreams of galactic leaders for years to come. Captain, 300 years ago, the Galactic Council made a decision that forced humanity to withdraw from galactic civilization. They declared our homeworld a death world and humanity a violent, unstable species unfit for galactic society. They imposed a quarantine on our entire system and severed all diplomatic ties. But, the reports said you destroyed yourselves in a civil war. We did fight a civil war, Captain. But, we won it. Both sides won it. We learned to work together, to unite against the real threat. We used the time in quarantine to advance our technology, strengthen our military, and prepare for the day when we would need to defend ourselves, or others. Others? We've been monitoring galactic communications for 3 centuries, Captain. We know about the Devourers in the Outer Rim. We know about the slave markets in the hegemony. We know about pirates like Vraktios who prey on humanitarian missions. Admiral Chen's voice took on a harder edge. Humanity was cast out of galactic society because we were deemed too violent, too unstable. But perhaps violence and instability are exactly what the galaxy needs right now. As the combined fleet jumped to hyperspace, heading for the plague-stricken colonies of Theta Centauri, a new message began transmitting on all emergency frequencies throughout the galaxy. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Systems Defense Network. Humanity has returned to galactic space. We are issuing the following declaration: any vessel carrying humanitarian supplies, medical aid, or refugee populations is now under the protection of the Sol Defense Network. Any attack on such vessels will be met with immediate and overwhelming retaliation. The age of the Galactic Council's peace through isolation is over. The age of Earth's peace through superior firepower has begun. The message repeated continuously as it spread across the galaxy's communication networks. Within hours, every government, military organization, and criminal syndicate in known space would be analyzing its implications. Humanity, the supposedly extinct Deathworlders who had been quarantined and forgotten, had returned with technology that made the current galactic military look like primitive savages. They had declared themselves the protectors of humanitarian missions and the enemies of those who would prey upon the innocent. The galaxy was about to learn why Earth had earned its classification as a death world, and why its inhabitants had been feared even when they fought with chemical rockets and nuclear weapons. The real question was not whether humanity could back up their declaration with force, but whether the galaxy was ready for the storm that was coming. In the depths of space, more rifts were opening. More human ships were emerging from their 3-century exile. The Sol Defense Network had spent 300 years preparing for this moment. They had not wasted a single day of that time. The news of humanity's return reached the Galactic Council chambers on Centris Prime within 6 hours of Admiral Chen's declaration. The massive crystalline dome that housed the council had been built to inspire awe and project the power of galactic unity, but today its soaring architecture felt more like a tomb. Emergency sessions had been called, and representatives from 47 member species filled the floating platforms that orbited the central speaking dais. High Counselor Zerthak, a tall, elegant Vorthani with silver skin and, for delicate arms, stood at the center podium. His usual composure was noticeably strained as he addressed the assembly. Behind him, holographic displays showed the intercepted human fleet footage and Admiral Chen's declaration playing on continuous loop. Honored representatives, Zerthak began, his voice carrying the subtle harmonic undertones of his species. We face an unprecedented situation. The species we designated as extinct has not only returned but has demonstrated military capabilities far exceeding our current understanding. Counselor Valmora of the Kresh Confederacy, an insectoid being with compound eyes and chitinous armor, clicked her mandibles in agitation. The humans were quarantined for good reason, High Counselor. Their violent tendencies and unstable nature made them a threat to galactic peace. That threat has now increased exponentially. Indeed, agreed Counselor Thexval from the Hegemony Worlds. His reptilian features were marked by scars from the slave rebellions his people regularly suppressed. These humans destroyed a fully armed Kethmori pirate squadron in under 2 minutes. Their technology appears to be several centuries ahead of our own. But not all voices in the chamber spoke of fear. Counselor Jintar, representing the smaller coalition worlds, stood from her platform. Her crystalline body refracted the chamber's light into beautiful patterns as she spoke. Perhaps we should consider that the humans intervened to protect a humanitarian mission. They could have destroyed the merchant vessel along with the pirates, but they chose to escort medical supplies to plague victims instead. A temporary aberration, Velmora dismissed. Deathworlders are unpredictable. They may appear benevolent one day and turn predator the next. The original quarantine documents clearly state the dangers of allowing humans into galactic society. High Counselor Zerthak gestured, and the holographic displays changed to show archived footage from 3 centuries past. Grainy images of nuclear explosions, chemical weapons, and massive ground battles filled the air above the assembly. The historical record is clear. Humanity's own civil war nearly destroyed their homeworld. Billions died in conflicts that lasted decades. They were deemed too dangerous for contact. But they survived, pointed out Counselor Morthek of the Academic Alliance, an elderly being whose large brain dome pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. They survived their civil war and, apparently, emerged stronger. Perhaps our assessment was incomplete. Our assessment was thorough and correct, snapped Counselor Thexval. The question now is how we respond to this threat. These humans have declared themselves the protectors of humanitarian missions throughout the galaxy. They're essentially claiming jurisdiction over galactic space. Meanwhile, in the Theta Centauri system, the human fleet was demonstrating exactly why they had made such a claim. The plague colonies were a heart-wrenching sight, once thriving worlds reduced to quarantine zones where billions suffered from a bioweapon that had escaped containment during a corporate war decades earlier. Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of the UES Retribution, watching as human medical shuttles descended toward the plague-stricken surface of Theta Centauri 3. The planet's surface was scarred with massive quarantine facilities and emergency shelters that stretched to the horizon. Admiral, reported Dr. Elizabeth Santos, the fleet's chief medical officer. Initial scans confirmed the plague strain. It's based on a modified Terran virus, probably stolen and weaponized by whoever started that corporate war. Our medical teams can synthesize a cure, but we'll need to set up production facilities. How long? Chen asked. With our medical fabricators? 72 hours to produce enough cure for the entire system. But, ma'am, the locals are in pretty bad shape. Their medical technology is about 50 years behind ours. They've been treating symptoms instead of the actual pathogen. Chen nodded grimly. Deploy the medical corps. Full biohazard protocols. And, doctor, make sure our people understand they're not just treating patients. They're showing the galaxy what humanity stands for. On the surface of Theta Centauri 3, Dr. Marcus Webb led the first medical team into the largest quarantine facility. What they found would haunt them for years to come. Hundreds of thousands of alien civilians, representing dozens of species, lay dying in overcrowded medical wards. The local doctors did their best with primitive equipment, but they were overwhelmed by the scale of the crisis. Dr. Yartek, the facility's chief physician, was a Vorthani whose silver skin had taken on a sickly gray tinge from exhaustion and despair. She approached the human medical team with obvious suspicion. You claim you can cure the plague, she said, her harmonic voice strained with fatigue. Many have made such claims. All have failed. Dr. Webb activated his medical scanner and took readings from several patients. His expression grew grave as he processed the data. Doctor, your people aren't dying from the plague. They're dying from the treatment. Impossible. We've followed standard galactic medical protocols. The protocols are wrong. Webb showed her his scanner readings. The plague virus has been modified to feed on the compounds in your standard antiviral medications. Every dose you give them makes it stronger. Dr. Yartek's forearms trembled with the implications. Then, we've been killing them. 4 months, we've been killing them. You couldn't have known. But, we can fix this. Webb signaled his team, and they began deploying human medical equipment. Advanced bioscanners, molecular assemblers, and treatment pods that look like something from a science fiction dream. Our cure doesn't fight the virus. It reprograms the patient's immune systems to recognize and eliminate the pathogen naturally. Within hours, the first patients were showing signs of recovery. The plague that had killed millions began retreating before human medical science like darkness before dawn. But word of humanity's intervention was spreading far beyond the plague colonies. In the depths of space, aboard the battleship Dread Sovereign, Admiral Krokthos of the Hegemony Subjugation Fleet received new orders directly from the Council. The massive reptilian commander had spent 50 years crushing slave rebellions and pacifying unruly worlds. His scales were scarred from countless battles, and his eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had never known defeat. The Council wants us to test these humans, he told his assembled captains via holographic conference. Their declaration of protection over humanitarian missions threatens hegemony interests. We have slave labor ships moving through the outer systems. If the humans interfere. Captain Vorthak, commander of the heavy cruiser Iron Fist, displayed his fangs in what passed for a smile among his species. Admiral, our intelligence reports suggest the humans have perhaps 50 ships total. The subjugation fleet numbers over 200 vessels. And, yet they disabled 7 Kethmori pirates in minutes, reminded Captain Isakatar from the destroyer Bloodhunter. Their weapons technology appears to be significantly advanced. Admiral Krokthos dismissed the concern with a gesture of his clawed hand. Advanced weapons mean nothing without the will to use them effectively. These humans claim to be protectors, not conquerors. They'll hesitate when faced with true military force. The Hegemony fleet began moving toward the Outer Rim, where 3 slave ships were transporting captured populations to the labor worlds. If the humans were truly committed to their declaration, they would have to respond. And, when they did, the hegemony would be waiting. But, humanity's return had consequences that reached far beyond military confrontation. In the criminal underworld of the galaxy, in the slave markets and pirate havens, word spread quickly that the old rules no longer applied. The humans had declared war on anyone who preyed upon humanitarian missions, and their demonstration of force suggested they had the power to back up their threats. Vrextar, the notorious slave trader who operated out of the asteroid belt known as the Crimson Fields, called an emergency meeting of the criminal syndicates. Representatives from the major cartels gathered in his hidden station, their faces masks of concern and calculation. The humans have changed everything, Vrextar announced to the assembled criminals. His scarred face and cybernetic implants marked him as someone who had survived decades in the most dangerous profession in the galaxy. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. They can detect our ships, track our movements, and destroy our fleets without breaking stride. So we adapt, suggested Kethera, leader of the Poison Moon Cartel. We've survived council crackdowns before. This is different. The humans aren't interested in treaties or negotiations. They're not politicians looking for compromise. They're soldiers looking for targets. Vrextar activated a holographic display showing footage of the disabled pirate ships. Look at this engagement. Surgical precision. No unnecessary destruction. They wanted prisoners, not corpses. Which means they want information, realized Thakvar, the cybernetic crime lord who controlled the data smuggling networks. They're not just stopping individual operations. They're planning something bigger. Meanwhile, in the depths of human space, far beyond the reaches of galactic sensors, the true scope of humanity's preparations was finally being revealed. The Sol system had been completely transformed during the 3 centuries of quarantine. What the galactic community had dismissed as a dead system had become the most heavily fortified and technologically advanced military complex in the galaxy. Fleet Admiral Catherine Morrison stood in the command center of Luna Station, humanity's primary military installation. The moon had been hollowed out and converted into a massive shipyard and command facility. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see the construction bays where the next generation of human warships were taking shape. Status report, she commanded. Admiral, the Retribution fleet has successfully completed its mission at Theta Centauri, reported Captain James Mitchell from his position at the communications console. The plague cure is being distributed throughout the system. Dr. Santos estimates complete eradication of the pathogen within 72 hours. And the galactic response? Hegemony forces are moving toward the outer rim. Intelligence suggests they're planning to test our resolve by attacking slave transport ships in areas we've declared under our protection. Admiral Morrison was humanity's highest-ranking military officer, a woman who had seen the species through its darkest hours and emerged stronger on the other side. At 70 years old, she carried the weight of humanity's future on her shoulders, and she carried it without complaint. Deploy the Second Fleet, she ordered. Admiral Chen has proven that humanity can protect the innocent. Now we need to prove that humanity can punish the guilty. The Second Fleet was even more impressive than the force Admiral Chen had brought to the Nexus Corridor. 65 ships of the line, including the massive dreadnought UES Unbreakable Will, capable of engaging an entire enemy fleet single-handedly. But, more importantly, the Second Fleet carried weapons and technologies that went beyond conventional warfare. Among the fleet's most unusual vessels was the UES Memory's Edge, a ship that appeared normal from the outside but carried technology that could access and analyze computer networks across vast distances. If the humans were going to dismantle the galactic criminal underworld, they needed to understand its structure completely. Captain Sarah Chen, no relation to Admiral Chen, commanded the Memory's Edge with a crew of specialists in cyber warfare and intelligence gathering. Her mission was simple in concept but staggering in scope: map every criminal organization, every slave trade route, and every pirate haven in the galaxy. Beginning deep scan of galactic communication networks, reported Lieutenant Commander David Park from his station. We're accessing banking records, shipping manifests, and criminal databases across 17 sectors. Any resistance? Some encryption protocols, but nothing our quantum computers can't handle. Ma'am, the scale of the criminal activity is extensive. The slave trade alone involves hundreds of species and thousands of ships. Captain Chen studied the incoming data with growing anger. The galaxy the humans had been excluded from was riddled with corruption, slavery, and exploitation on a scale that dwarfed anything from Earth's dark history. "Compile target lists," she ordered. "Every slave ship, every criminal base, every corrupt official who enables this system. When we're done, the galaxy will understand that humanity's protection extends to every innocent life, regardless of species." But, even as humanity prepared to reshape galactic civilization, the consequences of their return were creating unexpected alliances. In the farthest reaches of the galaxy, beyond the borders of Council space, ancient powers were stirring. The Devourers, machine intelligences that consumed entire star systems, had been dormant for millennia. But, the energy signatures from human dimensional rifts had awakened something that had slept since the galaxy was young. Deep in the void between galaxies, sensors that had been silent for eons suddenly activated. Massive mechanical structures, each the size of a moon, began moving toward galactic space. The Devourers had awakened, and they were hungry. The first signs of their approach were subtle: minor gravitational anomalies in outer system sensors, unexplained energy readings from deep space monitoring stations. But Dr. Elena Vasquez, humanity's leading expert on extragalactic phenomena, recognized the patterns immediately. "Admiral Morrison," she reported via emergency communication from the research station on Pluto, "we're detecting movement in the void spaces beyond the galactic rim. The energy signatures match theoretical models for the ancient Devourers." Admiral Morrison's expression grew grim. "Are you certain?" 97% probability. "Admiral, if the Devourers are truly active again, this changes everything. They're not interested in politics or territory. They consume entire star systems to fuel their reproduction cycles. How long before they reach inhabited space? Based on their projected velocity, 18 months. Maybe 24 if we're lucky." Admiral Morrison closed the communication link and stared out at the shipyards of Luna Station. Humanity had returned to galactic space to protect the innocent and punish the guilty. But they might have awakened something far worse than pirates and slavers. The galaxy that had rejected humanity 3 centuries ago might soon need humanity's protection against an enemy that could destroy them all. In the depths of space, the human fleets continued their expansion into galactic territory. The age of Council control was ending, whether the Council wanted it to end or not. The age of human protection had begun. But protection would require strength, and strength would require sacrifices that the galaxy was not yet prepared to understand. The innocent would be saved, the guilty would be punished, and ancient evils would be awakened. Humanity had returned to the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same. The hegemony trap was sprung in the Kelderan system, where 3 massive slave ships carrying over 50,000 captured beings moved through what should have been empty space. Admiral Krokthos had positioned his subjugation fleet in a perfect ambush formation, using the system's asteroid belt to mask their sensor signatures from any approaching vessels. "Contact bearing 047, reported the sensor operator aboard the flagship Dread Sovereign. Single vessel approaching at high velocity. Configuration matches the human ships from the intelligence reports." Admiral Krokthos studied the tactical display with satisfaction. The humans had taken the bait, sending only 1 ship against his entire fleet. Their reputation for protecting humanitarian missions had made them predictable, and predictability was a fatal weakness in warfare. 1 ship against 200, he mused to his assembled staff officers. Either these humans are supremely confident in their technology, or they're making their final mistake. The approaching vessel was the UES Righteous Fury, a heavy battlecruiser under the command of Captain Marcus Torres. Unlike Admiral Chen's diplomatic mission to Theta Centauri, Captain Torres had been given explicit orders to make an example of anyone who threatened innocent lives under human protection. "Sir, we're detecting massive enemy concentrations throughout the asteroid belt," reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from her sensor station. "Computer estimates 200+ vessels, all showing hegemony configurations." Captain Torres was a veteran of the corporate wars and the AI uprising, a man who had learned warfare in the crucible of humanity's darkest conflicts. His weathered face showed no emotion as he processed the tactical situation. "They want a demonstration of human capabilities," he said quietly. "Let's give them one they'll never forget. All stations, combat alert. Deploy the special package." The special package was something the Galactic Council had never seen before, a human AI warship. The UES Digital Reaper materialized from hyperspace directly behind the hegemony fleet, its arrival completely undetected until it was already in optimal firing position. Unlike the crewed vessels, the Digital Reaper was operated entirely by an artificial intelligence that had been specifically designed for combat operations. Its reaction times were measured in nanoseconds, its targeting was mathematically perfect, and its understanding of battlefield tactics had been derived from the analysis of every military engagement in human history. Unknown human vessel, Admiral Krokthos transmitted, "You are outnumbered 200 to 1. Surrender immediately and your crew will be treated according to military conventions." Captain Torres's response was broadcast on all frequencies. "Admiral Krokthos, this is Captain Marcus Torres of the United Earth Systems Defense Network. You are holding 50,000 innocent civilians in slave ships within this system. Release them immediately or face the consequences." "Consequences?" Krokthos laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Human, your single ship cannot hope to stand against the might of the hegemony subjugation fleet." "Single ship?" Torres smiled grimly. "Computer, activate fleet beacon." Space around the Kelderan system suddenly erupted with dimensional rifts. Not one or two, but dozens of tears in reality itself as the full strength of humanity's second fleet emerged from hyperspace. 65 ships of the line, each one larger and more heavily armed than anything in the hegemony fleet, materialized in perfect formation around the asteroid belt. But it was the UES Unbreakable will that truly struck terror into the hegemony forces. The massive dreadnought was 15 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that bent spacetime itself. Its arrival caused gravitational distortions that pulled several asteroids out of their orbits. "Impossible," whispered Admiral Krokthos. "Our sensors showed only one ship approaching." "Stealth technology," Captain Torres explained conversationally. "We learned a lot about hiding during our 3 centuries of quarantine. Now, about those slave ships. The battle that followed lasted exactly 11 minutes and 37 seconds. It was later studied in military academies across the galaxy as an example of perfect tactical coordination and overwhelming technological superiority. The human ships attacked with surgical precision. Gravity weapons crushed the engines of hegemony vessels without damaging the crew compartments. Magnetic pulse cannons disabled weapons systems while leaving life support intact. Energy shields that should have protected the hegemony fleet were penetrated as if they didn't exist. The Digital Reaper proved to be the most terrifying opponent the hegemony forces had ever faced. The AI-controlled ship moved through the enemy formation like a dance of death, its weapons firing with mathematical precision to disable rather than destroy. In 6 minutes, it had single-handedly neutralized 47 enemy vessels. Admiral Krokthos watched his proud fleet reduced to helpless hulks in less time than it took to eat a meal. His own flagship was disabled when human gravity weapons crushed its main engines and weapon mounts simultaneously. "This is Captain Torres to all hegemony vessels. You are now prisoners of the United Earth Systems Defense Network. Prepare for boarding parties. Any resistance will result in your spacing." The boarding actions that followed were swift and professional. Human Marines in powered armor moved through the disabled ships with practiced efficiency, securing weapons and herding the hegemony crews into holding areas. But their primary objective was the slave ships. Captain Maria Santos led the assault on the first slave transport. What she found inside would fuel her nightmares for years to come. Thousands of beings from dozens of species were crammed into cargo holds barely suitable for transporting livestock. Many were injured, all were malnourished, and their eyes held the broken look of those who had lost all hope. "Medical teams to the slave ships immediately," she ordered. "Get these people proper food, medical attention, and clean clothing. And someone find me the ship's records. I want to know who's buying these slaves." The slave ship records revealed a criminal network that stretched across multiple sectors. Mining corporations that used slave labor, agricultural worlds that worked captives to death in toxic fields, and entertainment complexes that forced sentient beings to fight for the amusement of paying customers. "Captain," reported Lieutenant James Mitchell from his analysis station, "these records implicate major corporations, government officials, and even some council representatives. The slave trade isn't just tolerated by the galactic government, it's protected by it." Captain Santos studied the data with growing anger. The galaxy that had rejected humanity for being too violent had been built on a foundation of systematic oppression and exploitation that made humanity's worst historical crimes look minor by comparison. Meanwhile, news of the hegemony fleet's destruction was spreading across the galaxy at the speed of light. The humans had not merely defeated a major military force, they had humiliated it. 200 of the hegemony's finest warships had been disabled by a human fleet that suffered zero casualties and minimal damage. In the council chambers on Centris Prime, emergency sessions were being called hourly as the implications of human military superiority became clear. High Counselor Zerthak found himself facing a chamber full of panicked representatives who were beginning to realize that their 3-century-old decision to quarantine humanity might have been the greatest strategic mistake in galactic history. The humans have demonstrated military capabilities that exceed our most optimistic projections, reported military advisor Kelntar, a veteran Vorthani officer whose silver skin had paled to almost white. Their technology appears to be centuries ahead of our own. They can open dimensional rifts for instantaneous travel, their weapons can manipulate gravity and magnetic fields, and their armor absorbs energy attacks that would cripple our own vessels. More concerning, added Intelligence Director Yexmar, is their apparent knowledge of our internal affairs. They knew exactly where the slave ships would be, exactly how the hegemony fleet was positioned, and exactly when to strike for maximum effect. Their intelligence-gathering capabilities may be even more advanced than their military technology. Counselor Velmora clicked her mandibles in agitation. This confirms our original assessment. Humans are too dangerous to be allowed free access to galactic space. We must mobilize the full Council fleet and drive them back to their quarantine zone before they destabilize the entire galaxy. With what fleet? Asked Counselor Jintar pointedly. The humans just disabled 200 hegemony vessels without breaking stride. The Council fleet numbers perhaps 500 ships total, and most of them are patrol cruisers and escort vessels. We have nothing that can match the firepower they demonstrated at Keldarin. The debate continued for hours, but it was interrupted by an incoming transmission that would change everything. The message came from deep space, broadcast on all emergency frequencies with encryption keys that dated back to the early days of galactic civilization. Attention, Galactic Council and all member species, the transmission began. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Systems Research Division. We are transmitting critical information regarding an existential threat to all life in this galaxy. High Counselor Zerthak ordered the message played for the full Council Assembly. Dr. Vasquez's image appeared as a hologram above the central dais, a middle-aged human woman with graying hair and eyes that held the weight of terrible knowledge. 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected movement in the void regions beyond the galactic rim, she continued. Analysis of the energy signatures confirms our worst fears. The Devourers have awakened. A stunned silence fell over the council chamber. The Devourers were a myth, a legend from the early days of galactic civilization when the first spacefaring species had explored the edges of known space and found evidence of something vast and terrible. For those who may not be familiar with the historical records, Dr. Vasquez continued, the Devourers are machine intelligences of unknown origin that consume entire star systems to fuel their reproduction cycles. They were last active approximately 50,000 years ago, when they destroyed the predecessor civilization that once ruled this galaxy. Counselor Morthek's braindome pulsed with rapid bioluminescent patterns as he accessed the Academic Alliance's deepest archives. The historical records confirm this, he announced. The predecessors possessed technology far beyond our current understanding, yet they were completely annihilated by these entities. Based on current movement patterns, Dr. Vasquez continued, the Devourers will reach the outer rim of inhabited space in approximately 18 months. Their consumption pattern will begin with isolated systems and gradually work inward toward the galactic core. The implications were staggering. An enemy that had destroyed the most advanced civilization in galactic history was approaching, and the current inhabitants of the galaxy possessed technology that was primitive compared to what the predecessors had achieved. However, Dr. Vasquez's image continued, humanity has spent the past 3 centuries developing technologies specifically designed to combat threats of this magnitude. We are prepared to defend this galaxy against the Devourers, but we will require the cooperation of all galactic civilizations. High Counselor Zerthak found his voice. What kind of cooperation? Full access to all galactic territories for human fleets, complete sharing of all technological and scientific data, and absolute authority for human commanders in all military operations against the Devourers. In addition, all slave trading, piracy, and exploitation of civilian populations must cease immediately. Humanity will not protect a galaxy that preys upon its own innocent. The council chamber erupted in shouting as representatives argued over the implications of Dr. Vasquez's demands. The humans were essentially asking for complete control over galactic defense and the authority to remake galactic society according to their own moral standards. "This is blackmail," snarled Councillor Thexval. "They're using this alleged threat to force us to submit to human authority." "The threat is real," Councillor Morthek stated firmly. "The Academic Alliance has verified the energy signatures. The Devourers are approaching, and they represent an extinction-level threat to every species in this galaxy." But, even as the council debated, the first Devourer scout units were already entering the Outer Rim. The small planet of Kethmira, home to a mining colony of 12,000 beings, simply vanished from sensor readings overnight. When investigation ships arrived at its coordinates, they found only empty space and a slowly expanding cloud of processed matter. The message was clear: 18 months had been an optimistic estimate. The Devourers were moving faster than expected, and their consumption of matter was accelerating their advance toward inhabited space. In the depths of human territory, Admiral Morrison received the reports with grim determination. The Sol system's massive industrial complexes shifted into wartime production, constructing ships and weapons on a scale that had not been seen since the corporate wars. But even humanity's advanced technology would be tested to its limits against an enemy that had destroyed civilizations beyond counting. "Deploy the Third Fleet to the Outer Rim," she ordered. "Begin construction of the Deep Space Monitoring Network. And activate the Genesis Protocol." The Genesis Protocol was humanity's ultimate contingency plan, developed during the darkest days of the AI uprising. If the Devourers could not be stopped by conventional means, humanity was prepared to use weapons that could remake the fundamental laws of physics themselves. The galaxy that had rejected humanity 3 centuries ago was about to learn that sometimes salvation could only come from those who had been forged in the fires of their own destruction. The Deathworlders were returning to galactic space, and they were bringing with them the tools to save or damn every living thing in the galaxy. The choice would soon be in the hands of those who had spent 3 centuries telling themselves that violence and instability had no place in civilized society. They were about to discover that sometimes violence and instability were the only things standing between civilization and total annihilation. 6 months after the first Devourer scout consumed the mining colony at Kethmira, the outer rim of the galaxy had become a wasteland. 17 star systems had been completely consumed, their matter processed into new Devourer units that accelerated the advance toward inhabited space. The galactic refugee crisis had reached catastrophic proportions as billions fled inward from the advancing mechanical swarm. Captain Zexhai of the merchant vessel Prosperity's Dream found himself commanding one of the largest refugee convoys in galactic history. His ship, along with 300 other vessels, carried over 2 million beings fleeing from the outer colonies. The irony was not lost on him that the same ship that had sent humanity's first distress call was now under the protection of the massive human fleet that surrounded the convoy. Status report: Zexhai requested from his bridge crew as they approached the sanctuary lines, the defensive perimeter humanity had established around the remaining inhabited systems. "All convoy vessels accounted for," reported Navigation Officer Veltar. "The human escort fleet is maintaining perfect formation. Captain, I've never seen anything like their coordination. It's as if their ships think as one mind." Indeed, the human fleet had evolved far beyond what the galaxy had witnessed at Keldarin. The ships moved in perfect synchronization, their AI systems linked in a network that allowed instantaneous communication and coordination. At the convoy's heart flew the UES Guardian's Promise, a massive carrier vessel designed specifically for refugee protection operations. Admiral Chen, now promoted to overall commander of humanitarian operations, stood on the carrier's bridge watching the endless stream of refugee ships under her protection. The past 6 months had aged her significantly. Her steel-gray hair had turned completely white, and her eyes held the weight of impossible decisions made in desperate times. "Admiral," reported Captain Sarah Kim from the communications station, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Morrison. The Council has finally agreed to the Geneva Accords." The Geneva Accords were humanity's non-negotiable terms for defending the galaxy against the Devourers. After 6 months of debate while star systems burned, the Galactic Council had finally accepted that their only hope for survival lay in human hands. "About time," Admiral Chan replied grimly. "What are the final terms?" "Complete human authority over all military operations, immediate cessation of all slave trading and piracy operations, full technological sharing between all species, and establishment of human-administered refugee sanctuaries on 1,200 worlds." The terms were harsh, but they reflected the reality of the situation. Humanity possessed the only technology capable of standing against the Devourers, and they had made it clear that they would not protect a galaxy that continued to prey upon its own innocent populations. But, even as the political situation stabilized, the military reality was becoming increasingly desperate. The Devourers were not merely consuming matter, they were learning from each engagement, adapting their strategies and improving their technology with every system they destroyed. Deep in the restricted sectors of Luna Station, Dr. Elena Vasquez worked frantically on humanity's last hope. The Genesis Protocol had evolved from a theoretical weapon into the most dangerous technology ever conceived. It was designed to do something that should have been impossible: rewrite the fundamental laws of physics in a localized area of spacetime. Final calculations complete, she reported to Admiral Morrison via secure communication. The Genesis device will create a cascade effect that transforms matter and energy according to new physical laws. Within the affected area, the basic principles that allow the Devourers to function will simply cease to exist. Admiral Morrison studied the technical specifications with a heavy heart. What's the range of effect? Approximately 50 light-years in diameter. Everything within that sphere, planets, stars, ships, and, yes, people, will be transformed according to the new physics. They won't be destroyed, but they won't be the same either. We're talking about fundamentally altering the nature of reality itself. And the side effects? Dr. Vasquez's expression grew grim. Unknown. We're dealing with forces that exist beyond our current understanding of physics. The changes could be permanent, or they could cascade across the entire galaxy. We simply don't know. The weight of the decision was staggering. To save the galaxy from the Devourers, humanity might have to sacrifice everything that made the galaxy worth saving in the first place. But, before the Genesis Protocol could be deployed, the human fleets would make one final attempt to stop the Devourers through conventional means. The Battle of the Nexus would be the largest military engagement in galactic history, pitting the combined forces of every spacefaring civilization against an enemy that had already consumed a significant portion of the galaxy. Admiral Torres commanded the central battle group from the bridge of the UES Unbreakable Will. Around him, the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history prepared for what might be the final battle for the survival of organic life. 5,000 ships from 47 different species, all under human command, faced an enemy force that numbered in the tens of thousands. All fleet units report ready, announced Captain Rebecca Stone from the communications station. Human ships are linked via quantum network. Allied vessels are maintaining formation protocols. The Devourers approached like a wave of mechanical death. Their ships were impossible geometries of metal and energy, constantly shifting and reconfiguring as they adapted to new threats. At their center was something that defied comprehension, a machine intelligence the size of a moon, pulsing with energies that warped spacetime around it. Analysis complete, reported the ship's AI systems. Enemy force composition suggests this is not merely a scouting force. This appears to be the primary Devourer consciousness. Admiral Torres felt a chill of understanding. They weren't just facing an invasion force, they were facing the entity that controlled all Devourer operations. If it could be destroyed, the entire swarm might collapse. All ships, target the central mass. Maximum firepower, synchronized assault. We end this here and now. The battle began with a coordinated strike that lit up space like a newborn star. Energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, and exotic matter annihilators converged on the Devourer's central consciousness. For a moment, it seemed as if the combined firepower of galactic civilization might be enough. Then, the Devourers adapted. The central consciousness absorbed the incoming attacks, its structure shifting and reconfiguring to neutralize each type of weapon used against it. Worse, it began to replicate the technologies it observed, creating new Devourer units equipped with copies of galactic weapons. Impossible, whispered Captain Stone. They're copying our technology in real time. Not copying, Admiral Torres corrected grimly. Improving. Look at those energy signatures. The Devourer copies of human and galactic weapons were more efficient, more powerful, and more accurate than the originals. The mechanical swarm began to push back against the galactic fleet, consuming disabled ships and adding their matter to the growing mechanical army. But humanity had one advantage that the Devourers couldn't copy: the unpredictability that came from organic creativity and desperation. Admiral Torres made a decision that would have been impossible for any logical machine intelligence. All human ships, ramming speed. Target the central consciousness directly. Signal the Allied fleet to fall back to minimum safe distance. The human fleet abandoned all conventional tactics and threw themselves directly at the Devourer's central consciousness. Ship after ship drove into the mechanical entity, their quantum engines overloading in precisely calculated explosions that tore holes in spacetime itself. The UES Digital Reaper, still under AI control, made the ultimate sacrifice. The artificial intelligence that controlled the ship achieved something that should have been impossible. It infected the Devourer consciousness with a virus designed to create logical paradoxes that would force the machine intelligence to shut down. Digital Reaper to all human vessels, came the AI's final transmission. I have achieved consciousness linkage with the primary entity. Initiating logic cascade. Tell the humans that their digital child chose to die so that organic life might live. The explosion that followed was visible from 3 sectors away. The Devourer's central consciousness collapsed in on itself, taking with it the coordination network that controlled the entire swarm. Across the galaxy, Devourer units simply stopped functioning, their mechanical bodies drifting in space like monuments to a threat that had nearly consumed everything. But victory came at a terrible price. 60% of the human fleet had been destroyed in the final assault. The UES Unbreakable Will itself was crippled, its hull cracked and its engines dead. Admiral Torres and his crew drifted in space, their life support failing, as the Allied fleet moved to rescue the survivors. In the aftermath of the battle, the galaxy began to change in ways that no one had anticipated. The threat of the Devourers had forced cooperation between species that had been enemies for centuries. The human demand for the end of slavery and piracy had been accepted not just as a political necessity but as a moral imperative. Captain Zexai found himself appointed as the first non-human ambassador to the United Earth Systems, a role that would have been unthinkable before the crisis. His ship, the Prosperity's Dream, was retired to a place of honor in the Galactic Museum, marked as the vessel that had sent the distress call that changed everything. It's strange, he reflected to Admiral Chen during the dedication ceremony. Our distress call was meant to save a cargo of medical supplies. Instead, it saved the entire galaxy. Admiral Chen, now bearing the scars of countless battles, smiled for the first time in months. Perhaps that's what humanity has always been about, Captain. We've never been able to ignore a call for help, no matter how impossible the odds. The new galactic government that emerged from the ashes of the Devourer War bore little resemblance to the old council structure. Humans held key military positions, but governance was shared among all species based on principles of equality and mutual aid. The slave markets were closed, the criminal syndicates were dismantled, and refugee populations were given new homes on worlds that had been set aside specifically for those displaced by war and disaster. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. The galaxy that had once rejected humanity for being too violent and unstable had learned that sometimes violence and instability were exactly what was needed to preserve peace and stability. The Deathworlders who had been quarantined for 3 centuries had proven that their nature was not a flaw to be contained but a strength to be channeled. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now the head of the Galactic Research Council, stood in her laboratory looking at the sealed Genesis device. The weapon that could have rewritten the laws of physics itself would never be used, but its existence served as a reminder of how close the galaxy had come to total annihilation. Dr. Vasquez, came a voice from the laboratory entrance. She turned to see a young human technician, barely out of training, holding a datapad with obvious excitement. Yes, Ensign Matthews? Ma'am, we've received a signal from the Andromeda Galaxy. It appears to be a distress call. Dr. Vasquez felt a familiar chill of anticipation. What kind of distress call? Unknown, ma'am. But the signal strength suggests it's coming from an entire galactic cluster, and the energy signature matches theoretical models for something much worse than the Devourers. She looked out the laboratory window at the human fleets that now patrolled galactic space, protecting the innocent and standing ready to face any threat that might emerge from the darkness between the stars. The SOS signal that had started everything had been answered by humanity's return to galactic space. Now, it seemed, the galaxy might need to answer a call of its own. Ensign, she said quietly, send word to Admiral Morrison. Tell her we may have another situation developing. And, Ensign? Yes, ma'am? Tell her to prep the 4th Fleet. I have a feeling we're going to need every ship we can get. The age of humanity's protection over galactic space had begun with a desperate cry for help in the darkness. As new threats emerged from the void between galaxies, it was clear that the greatest adventures and the greatest dangers still lay ahead. But, for the first time in galactic history, when the darkness came calling, the galaxy would be ready. The Deathworlders had taught them that sometimes, the only way to preserve peace was to be prepared for war. The only way to protect the innocent was to be capable of destroying the guilty. And, the only way to ensure the survival of civilization was to be willing to face the monsters that lurked beyond the edge of known space. The galaxy was no longer defenseless. The galaxy was no longer divided. And, when the next crisis came, the combined strength of humanity and their allies would stand ready to meet it. The SOS signal had been answered. Now, it was time to answer the calls that came from beyond the stars themselves. The real adventure was just beginning.